Marsha Doud is our curator of the museum, and I think she lives here. That's her second home. We have Roger Early, who is our marketing social media person, and we have another volunteer in the crowd. Harriet Walker is also a volunteer at the museum. Dr. Kate is quite a person to learn a lot of facts about. We just talked in Boulder Junction, which is her hometown, and it was kind of nice because her grandson, Mike Newcomb, showed up at the presentation. And it's nice to see family and hear their side of the story. So that was good to hear. And for many years, they had hoped to turn the empty lot in Woodruff into a museum. And that's where the museum is currently where Dr. Kate's office was. It wasn't her building, but very graciously, Howard Young moved the building over. It was the old wellness building at Howard Young. They moved over to the museum site. The volunteers joined the Wisconsin Historical Society in 1986, and in 1988, Woodruff marked their 100th anniversary, and it opened. The Dr. Kate Museum and Historical Society is a nonprofit organization, collects and preserves and shares the stories of Woodruff, Arbor Vitae, Dr. Kate, the Million Penny Parade, and the Arbor Vitae Woodruff School. Now, a lot of people think the museum is all about Dr. Kate, and it isn't. There are so many things in there that it tells the history of Arbor Vitae, tells the history of Woodruff. We have Dr. Newcomb's, her examining room. We have all the things from her examining room there. So we have one room that's especially for her. There's we have the Million Penny Parade. We kind of have a section. We start off with the Woodruff Arbor Vitae, and then we go into the Million Penny Parade, then we go into, we'll show them the This Is Your Life Museum, or This Is Your Life DVD, and then we show them Dr. Kate's actual office. For 37 years, museum volunteers have worked to keep the community spirit up. And I don't know if you were here for our 70th Million Penny Parade, but there was community spirit. A lot of people said, we came because we haven't seen some of our classmates in 20 years, 30 years, and it was a good welcome home kind of thing. And we've had exhibits, we changed exhibits, and we're getting ready to change some of the exhibits right now in the museum because of the 250th anniversary. So you might walk in when we're in the process of changing, or hopefully we'll get it done before people start to come in. But we've celebrated with 3 Million Penny Parades. We've welcomed visitors from around the world, not just like Canada or the United States. We've had Hong Kong, Turkey, Mexico, Norway, Israel, the United Kingdom, Australia. There's a lot of people, and I keep asking, how did you hear about us? They've gone on the website, or they'll look, what's something to do in Woodruff? And that's where they find it. We have published 3 cookbooks and a coloring book. We've raised funds and awarded 24 scholarships to ABW students over the years. The community grew when Dr. Kate opened her main office on the main street, and she later relocated it to the museum's current site in 1947. She covered 300 square miles, making house calls and delivering 3,000 babies without losing a mother or a baby. She needed a hospital closer than Rhinelander, Tomahawk, or Ironwood. So she was kind of thinking, we gotta build. The land and materials, labor, sheets, pillowcases, towels, they were all donated. If people couldn't afford to give land or big amounts of money, they give a towel. You know how important a towel is when you're in the hospital? Yet, the project remained unfinished. Community spirit became a teaching moment to Otto Burek, the geometry teacher at Arbor Vitae Woodruff School. A devoted physician, an engaged community, an innovative teacher, 17 determined geometry students, and supports from the Northwoods and beyond all came together in the community spirit. along with millions of pennies. They built the Lakeland Memorial Hospital. The community supported the effort, one penny at a time, and they continue to this day to support us. It's surprising how many people come in and they'll say, my grandmother was here, or was it Dr. Kate maybe, or my aunt. And I can say that too, because my aunt on my husband's side was the first penny queen down in Bassett. And she, to her day, even at her funeral, she had a little table up, and she had a demonstration and a display of Dr. Kate music. And I thought, that was down in Viroqua, so you know, it gets around. I'm gonna let Marsha Doud talk to you a little bit now on some of the other things.
Well, Otto Burek was an entrepreneur. He was an absolute genius at marketing. But he was not a stranger to the need for a hospital, because his wife, Mary, was Dr. Kate's nurse. So he knew full well how much she needed that hospital. All of the Burek family actually got involved in the project because Bob Burek, the son who was in high school, actually drew the rendering of what became the design of the Lakeland Memorial Hospital. So when the money ran out, all the sources for fundraising were depleted. And our Woodruff State Bank did not have enough money to finish the project. Miraculously, those 17 kids in that class were deciding to study a million and see how much a million of something really was. So in November 1952, they sent out their first letters. And 104 days later, 104 school days later, they collected 1,700,000 pennies from all over the world, all continents, except Antarctica. I always have to say it because those doggone penguins just and all then 48 states. So, and newspapers all over the world carried these stories, and lo and behold, you know, in the beginning, it was slow going, and a lot of naysayers, never happened. That'll never be a hospital. That'll be a motel. Well, doggone it, Mr. Burek and those 17 kids showed everybody that that little penny really means something. It became a whole curriculum for the Arborvita Woodruff High School. Now, many of you may not know that Woodruff and Arborvita had a joint school district, a high school, which started in 1940. This was the site of the Minocqua High School, but Woodruff and Arborvita had their own high school. So all the classes in the high school got involved. The English classes wrote letters, the business classes got involved, the math classes counted, the shop classes made signs, the band classes learned the songs for the parade. So it was a whole community event. And to celebrate that 1,700,000 pennies, they decided to have a penny parade in Woodruff on Memorial Day weekend 1953. 10,000 people came to Woodruff to see those pennies on display in the school gym. Now, they had to reinforce that school gym floor, okay, to hold those pennies. And the people coming threw in $8,000 more. So, I want to show you some really exciting things about these 17 kids. This was quite an achievement. This Look magazine with Queen Elizabeth on the cover ran an article about those 17 kids. Women's Day ran an article about it. Congressional record, May 1953. Kids at ABW school were recognized in the congressional record. That's quite an accomplishment for a little school and a little town. This is one of our prized possessions. It's a Hope Mifflin textbook with a lesson about Dr. Kate and the Million Penny Parade. This textbook was used or came out in the 60s for 7th grade language arts students. And actually, we were given this by Kathy Burrick-Patton, who was a teacher in the Eagle River School District, and they used this textbook in that school district. So this is really cherished thing that we have. But as you can see by our few things we brought, ice cutting was a big deal on Arrowhead Lake from 1935 to 1985. The Nestle Down, and Kate here went to ABW, and all of us kids ran to the Nestle Down noon hour to get a hot fudge sundae or cherry coke. It was on the main street of Woodruff. Our beloved ABW school. This was Old Bill, our Woodruff's town pet, who was a delivery horse in town, and he was so smart, he would not move on from the delivery unless he got a treat. And all the kids in town loved him so much. In the winter, he'd pull them on sleighs. So when he died at the age of 30, the school in Woodruff actually closed down, so all the kids could go to his funeral. Now, the first school in Woodruff was built exactly where the world's largest penny stands now. That was built in 1891. And then in the 20s, there were too many kids for that school. And part of that school actually was moved across the street. The Drager family, and that part of that old school is still on the lot directly across from the Big Penny. So then in the 20s, a brick school was built, and then it was added on and added on until in the late 90s, it moved out to its current site in Arborvitae. An exciting thing happening for us is this book coming out in November. It's a glorious children's book written by Margie Pruis, a Newbery Prize-winning author, about the Penny Parade. She will be here November 13th at 4 o'clock to sign and sell books. It's just a glorious book. We started working on this right before COVID. The first time I met her at the museum, we had masks on. And the book stalled through that COVID time, and it just will be coming out. We're so excited about this. It's a glorious book. The big project we have going on is we need to put a roof over our wonderful Big Penny. It was built in 1954 by a Rhinelander construction worker, a mason. And he built it out of concrete blocks. And then it was skim coated to reflect the 1953 penny. So it was dedicated on Memorial Day weekend, 1954. And it's just weathering and showing stress. So to protect it, and we do have a state historical marker there, we need to build a roof. very costly road to the tune of $30,000, because it all has to meet zoning standards and all the bureaucracy that must be accomplished to put a roof over that penny. So we will be starting a very serious fundraising drive for that coming up later this fall. So I think we have some Dr. Kate babies here in the audience, and I sure would like for them to stand up and tell us something that they recall about their family's involvement knowing Dr. Kate.
Okay, I'm Karen Lashua. I lived up at Trout Lake, which is close to Boulder Junction. I remember my mother telling me I was born August 2nd, 1949, and Dr. Kate my mother started going to labor, and somehow she got a hold of Dr. Kate, and she was picked up by her mom and Pete, and they drove together all the way to Tomahawk. That's what I remember about when I was born. I wish my mother could tell me more stories. Another thing that I remember about Dr. Kate, everybody's a little bit nervous as a child, because it seemed every time we went into the doctor, we got a shot, right? So she would always, when I'd walk into her office, she'd always put up, do you remember those safety suckers that we used to have? She'd always hold that out like this, a little, an orange one. She always said the orange ones and the lion ones were the better ones for us, I guess. But she'd hold it out like this with a smile, like, come on, yeah. But that's exactly how I remember her. She always seemed to wear a black dress with that white overcoat. But yes, my mother dearly loved her. That's why I'm here today.
Todd? Okay.
I'm hiding.
Oh, there you
go
are.
ahead.
I'm Jerry Real. Was born and raised up in Manitowish Waters, and I was a Dr. Kate baby as well as 4 of my siblings. Now the older children were actually born at the house, and Dr. Kate came to the house, and as you all know, she came through all kinds of weather and circumstances to tend to the births of the children. And so I was born in Tomahawk, and so when it was time for me to be born, my father drove the car with Dr. Kate in the car to Tomahawk, and that's where I was born, as was 2 of my younger siblings. So she not only came to the house for delivering babies, but she also came to tend to any of the illness and disease that the kids would come up with. And back in the day, there was a lot of illness that they had to contend with, and so she was always available. And I'm not sure how they were able to contact her all the time, because early on they didn't even have telephones up in the area. But somehow she was always there when she was needed. So our family is deeply indebted to Dr. Kate.
I think the story was that people would put out a towel or something on their mailbox, and word spread, because not many people had a telephone in those days. One thing I want to say that you said about all the diseases, Dr. Kate's son had polio. He was actually in an iron lung. And she was a person way ahead of her time. There were all kinds of boys and girls camps here. And she insisted that all those kids had to have physicals before they could come to camp. Their vaccinations had to be up to date to come to camp. She also recognized that milk had to be pasteurized. That was not common in the 30s, 40s, and even early 50s. She also taught the first natural childbirth classes in the area, and she realized that there had to be septic systems, that sewage just could not flow out onto the ground and into the lakes and streams. So she was very ahead of her time. And you think about the irony today that we're discussing vaccinations. when I grew up, we were terrified of getting polio. Our parents were terrified. We knew people who had polio. And so she experienced it firsthand with her child. So she became very active in treating that. Todd, will you tell your story?
I too am a Dr. Kate baby, but actually I have a visual memory of her, not when I was a baby, but a young kid. I have a scar on my wrist where she pulled a piece of glass out. And I still remember visually this image of sitting in her office while she's working on that. Wow. It's a story that Marsha wants me to relate. Early 50s, my older brother Lynn, Jerry, you remember him. Little kid, he had rheumatic fever, spinal meningitis. He's in the hospital. He's on the verge of dying. Dr. Kate is telling my parents, prepare yourself. He's probably not going to make it. But we have this new strange miracle drug that might help. But I'm going to have to give him an awful lot of it, more than has ever been given to any other person. Parents had to sign all the permissions and all this stuff. So he got this massive injection of penicillin. It saved his life. He moved on with his life to become an awesome person. The massive injection they gave him is actually less than they give someone now for a case of gonorrhea. But at the time, nobody had any idea what this huge injection of this strange antibiotic would do. So that's my story on Dr. Kate.
Kate, did you want to say anything?
I'll say something. I'm a Dr. Kate kid, of course, but I'm lived all my life here in Monaco. As it turned out, I was born by the bridge, and it happened to be that February night that I'm supposed to be a Dr. Torpy kid. So what happened was Dr. Kate was in Tomahawk, but she was always checking on my mom, and she comes back and apparently it was snowing. She come into the house and checked my mom, and more or less what it said, nope, this is it. So then she stayed that night, and that was pretty much it. I was still a Dr. Kate kid. If you know Dr. Turpy as a kid, you got an earful no matter what you did. You got an earful. So that was kind of neat. But I saw Dr. Kate visually, but not really appointments or anything like that. And then I was in the parade, of course, carrying I'm a Dr. Kate kid on my chest, going down the street.
You know, she would, her husband would drive the car with the woman in labor in the back seat. And this summer, there was a gal that came into the museum, and she told the story that her mother was in the car with Dr. Kate, and it was getting really close. So they stopped at the Standard Oil complex on Trout Lake and knocked on the door, and Dr. Kate said, "We need to come in now." So she was actually born there. Anybody else have any? Yes, Judy.
I'm not Dr. Kate Baby, but I was up here at Trout Lake when I was little, and I evidently had a high fever. The Chicago fathers would bring their kids up, and their wives would leave them for the week, and then they'd come up on the weekends. So it was my mom and I, and my mom called Dr. Kate, and she said, my baby's really sick. I was like, I think too. And she said, take her down to Tomahawk to the
foundation. And one thing I want to share with you is Dr. Kate was made an honorary member of the Chippewa tribe at Lakeland. And she delivered a lot of babies, took care of a lot of people there. She was given an Ojibwa name, Lady of the North. She was inducted into the tribe with a ceremony. We have her headdress and her eagle feather that she wore in her headdress. And we have gotten permission from the tribe and the National Federation of Wildlife to host that feather in our museum. So when you brought that up about preservation, it clicked in. I was supposed to say that last week. Kate, yes.
I'm not a Dr. Kate baby, I'm too old for that.
Oh.
But I was one of her patients and I'm one of 10 kids, so we kept her pretty busy. But we could walk right from school, half block to her office. And she took a wood tick out of my head. Here.
We also have a couple of volunteers that work at the museum that are here tonight, and we want them to say a couple words. Harriet Walker.
I'm so glad to see so many people here. This is terrific. I met Marsha about 6 years ago and have,
Do you want to say how you met me?
because her husband was in hospice and I'm a hospice volunteer. Yep. And she talked us, my husband and I have been volunteers at the museum for a number of years now and absolutely, absolutely love it. We have had so many experiences of people coming into the museum. There was a woman who came in once with her adoptive sister, and she said, I was a Dr. Kate baby. Dr. Kate delivered me. And then it turned out that for reasons I don't know, her mother could not keep her. And Dr. Kate arranged her adoption with a family in Rhinelander, and she'd spent her whole life there. And this was her sister. And they looked at, you've sometimes maybe seen up on the pictures here, there are hundreds of pictures of Dr. Kate's babies in her examining room. And the two of them looked around a little bit, almost none of them are labeled, and she said, they said, that's me, that's me. And so we put a label on there to honor that. A couple of other things have happened while we were volunteering that are just so dear to me. A woman came in with her family, and the family was partly from Hong Kong, Asian, and partly from Belgium. Anyway, they were a wonderful family, and they enjoyed the museum. And I love to ask people when they come in where they're from. And she said, Hong Kong. And I said, oh, my daughter lived in Hong Kong, and her family. And where? Well, they lived in Repulse Bay and so forth. And she said, well, I was the admissions director of the American school. She had admitted my granddaughter. We're standing in Woodruff, Wisconsin. But more importantly is the story that happened just about a month or two ago, a couple of months ago, a few months ago. A woman came in and she said she had been there a couple of years before with her granddaughter, who was then in high school. And as they were watching, not this video that I think are we gonna show this video?
Yes.
Yes, but the longer one that we have of Dr. Kate on the show, This Is Your Life. And she looked over, her granddaughter was crying, tears running down her face. And her granddaughter had never had any confidence in herself. She was so moved by that film that she said, I'm going to go to college. And indeed she did. She entered college this fall because she thought if Dr. Kate could do all she did, I can do it too. So, thank you.
Motivational.
also have Lori Berryman here, who is going to tell us about the ABW third graders.
Only them.
Hi, I'm Lori Berryman. I taught at APW school for 25 years or so. And I taught social studies, which I loved. It's my favorite subject. And the textbook on Wisconsin history, when I taught fourth grade, had one page in the back of the book about Dr. Kate. One page and a picture. And I thought, come on. And so we did do a field trip that year to the museum. That's when I really learned about her and all that she did around here. And I thought, gosh, she's a celebrity. Why don't we do more about her? So we decided to do that. Passed it on to third grade, because they asked us to. And they now do a unit about Dr. Kate, and it includes, the story of her life, the story about her being up here. They read a book that is geared for their grade level. And then they come to the museum, and they kind of do it like just a museum tour that we give them. And then they do more research back in the classroom, and they have things to fill out. They have all kinds of information they need to put down and remember. And then they go back to the museum a couple months later and start writing down information on things that they have to remember about the Penny Parade or Mr. Burek or her office, things like that. And so then they put it all together and make a booklet, and then near the end of the school year they schedule another time into the museum, and they are the docent to their parents, which is, pretty cool, because many of those parents had never been in that museum, I found out. So we're really glad to bring them in. We're really glad to have kids going up through the grades and have them know something about Dr. Kate and the history of Woodruff and everything. So it works out really well. We enjoy having them come. It is a really good thing for them, for Woodruff's only celebrity. Do we have more? No. Any questions about that, or? Okay, well, if you have a kid that's went through ABW school in the last, how long has it been? 5, 6 years?
At least.
Ask them questions.
I do have a question. When was the hospital built?
1954,
54.
yeah,
1954?
right.
And what's it called? Lakeland
Memorial Hospital, right. Yeah, too bad it's not there anymore.
And she, where was it?
Down,
Where the tech center is.
yeah, well, no, a little before that, a block before that. There is a gazebo there now, and a plaque that talks about this was the site of the hospital.
If you go to the Big Penny and you go straight
Down one block.
down the street from the Big Penny,
Yeah.
that's where the original hospital was. And she would not allow that to be named after her. No way was she going to allow that, because it was the Lakeland area hospital. Because she was a humble woman, not ever in it for any celebrity.
Variety, right.
In fact, when it was thought that to get her on This Is Your Life, someone called Otto Burek to suggest getting her on This Is Your Life, because the staffers of that show had heard about her. He said, well, there's no way we're going to get her there without a scheme. So they worked with the Los Angeles Medical Society to invite her to go out there to a convention and speak. Well, she got the invitation, and she said, no, she couldn't go to that because her hospital had just opened and patients needed her, so no, she wouldn't go. So then they came up with Plan B, which was for the Wisconsin Medical Association to invite her, but they came personally and said she had to go to represent our state. So she reluctantly agreed to go. So they put her on the train because in those days, Woodruff had two different railroad lines that came through daily. So they put her on the train to Hollywood. And in those days, the Lakeland Times was a weekly. And nobody knew this. Once she was on that train safely out of the area and the paper came out, there it was front page. But they flew everybody out there. If you've not had a chance to see this video, we didn't have many TVs here. You know, if we had anybody was lucky enough to have a TV, first of all, they had instantaneous friends, because you could all went to their house. But if you had a TV, it was like looking out your window on a snowy night, because that's all you saw. We had Channel 2 from Green Bay and Channel 6 from Marquette, Michigan. And you know, we had the old big antenna outside, but everything had to be just lined up perfectly to see anything. So she didn't have time for television. So when he's calling her out of this audience, she has absolutely no clue what is going on. And then these people, she hasn't seen for 34 years, and she's supposed to recognize their voice. It's a wonderful experience. I've never seen anyone get up and leave during that. I've seen men wiping their tears, little kids sitting through the whole thing, because it's black and white TV and it's a novelty. But it is so touching to see her in her own words and to see out of yours, and to know, and her son, and to know what she all went through. Harriet, would you just tell a quick story about what Mike Newcomb said, how he can't watch This Is Your Life?
We met at the Bolton Junction presentation. Tom was Dr. Kate's son, and his son was Mike. And I turned around and looked. I did not know that was her grandson, except it was Dr. Kate sitting there. I don't think I've ever seen a likeness like that. He looked exactly like Dr. Kate and like his dad.
This is his picture.
Yeah, you don't see it so much there, but it's, anyway, he said he'd been to the museum maybe 5 or 6 times, but he could not watch that video, because every time his dad came onto the stage to greet his mom, who was utterly floored by that, he cried. Because to see his dad as a happy young man like that, hugging his grandmother, he knew his grandmother. He knew her as a grandmother, not as a doctor. Anyway, it was
I just have to tell you one other story that Mike Newcomb shared at Bolton Junction. His grandma was a card-carrying member of a women's Christian temperance. She did not cotton to any alcohol. But when all these big mail bags arrived in Woodruff full of letters, they never went to the post office. They either went to the school gym where there was a assembly line, or sometimes they went to some local bars on Main Street in Woodruff. And Mike was telling, she did not really approve of that. For the goal to get those letters and what was inside counted, she accepted that, but she was a card-carrying member of the Christian Temperance.
I'd also invite you to come down to the museum to see the video, but we're closed right now for the season, but you can on our website. You just go over to exhibits and just click down a little bit and you'll find it says This Is Your Life, and you can watch the entire episode right there.
I have a quick comment, and I was in grade school, and I distinctly remember that we all brought pennies, we saved our pennies, and we're scotch taping them to paper and everything else. It was a big project, but, from school and that would have been St. Elizabeth in Milwaukee. I can remember sending pennies up to Woodruff, and, to me, Woodruff could have been in the Antarctic.
And since we're getting rid of pennies in this country, if you don't want yours, we'll take them.
And when you come into the museum, the people that were collecting the monies back then, I just blows my mind. They saved all of the little cards that came with the pennies. They saved the envelopes that came, and on each of the envelopes, we have a display case that has all of the envelopes. You can see it, and it says 10 cents on one, it says $1.35 or something. It's just, they were very, very miraculous of what they did. It's just hard to believe they did that. And some of the pennies came in like socks. They put them in socks and sent it, or they had a soup can. It just came from all over. And when the kids come over for their tour, they collect pennies before they come. And usually, because it's the third graders that are the stars of this time, they usually have more of the pennies than the others. But they paid for 24 scholarships over the years. So it's something to see. Go ahead.
One more story. But this is relevant to Minocqua because the 48th state that sent in pennies actually came from Minocqua native George Grundy. Many of you know Betty Grundy?
Yeah, Betty.
Well, Betty and George didn't know each other back then, but George was stationed in Delaware with the Air Force, and he sent the last pennies putting the 48th state on the map. And then later, George and Betty met, and Betty became one of the first nurses at Lakeland Memorial Hospital. And for all of you who know her, she is a gem. So,
Roger, can we show
Sure.
the video in a little bit?
Can I just say one thing? Sure. So I'm from Minocqua originally, and I will say that the legend absolutely lives on. Like growing up, we knew Dr. Kate, so you guys have just been amazing. And it's weird because she seems almost like folklore as someone who just was like, yeah, Dr. Kate, because you've never met her. So like to hear actual stories, it's almost like a little bizarre. Like her as an actual human being, because it's always just been, yeah, Dr. Kate and the giant penny. And so
And she was quite the pioneer because we went out to where she lived one day after we closed the museum. And I can't believe how far back in her cabin was from the main road. And it's like, and you could see where the lake was and where the train came in, and it's like, it was very quiet, let me tell you that, because it was so far back in. And yet I'm thinking, that's how she traveled. Unbelievable. Sue?
Barb, I'd always heard that it was her husband who was sick. Was her son though, who lived at the polio?
yes.
Yes, but it was her husband is why they came back here, because Bill said we're going to the North Woods and he'll get better there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's quite the story.
And how many children did she have?
Two. Eldora and Tommy. Did she live? No, her mom was.
No, she did.
No, she
lost
after her stillborn, yeah.
That's right, that's right.
You said that she came up, where did she come up from? What was her hometown?
What was it,
She was born in Kansas.
Yeah.
In Kansas?
In Kansas, And then her mother died in childbirth when Dr. Kate was 4 years old. So her father decided to move to Buffalo, New York, and to become a lawyer. Ultimately, he became the president of Gillette Razor Company.
Wow.
And he would not allow Kate to go to medical school because he thought that wasn't ladylike. He said she could become a school teacher. So she taught 6th grade at Public School 54 in Buffalo, New York. She really did not like teaching because the kids needed to be disciplined. So, then his second wife died, and he needed Kate to come home to serve as his hostess for all these fancy dinner parties. Well, she hated all of that. That was not her thing. So one evening, she was serving a platter of squab. I didn't know what that was, immature pigeon. But she dropped the platter in an ambassador's leg. Well, the next morning, Mr. Pelham called her into his study, and he said, you can go to Melton. And I always think that's kind of ironic. She wasn't steady enough to deliver the swab, but she could go to Melton. So she graduated cum laude from the University of Buffalo in 1917 at the age of 31.
And her friends that on This Is Your Life, they were very proud of her that she was the first, the woman that was their friend that graduated.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Kate Pelham dreamt of being a doctor. She faced many challenges, and these trials inspired her to go to medical school. But her father refused to let her. So instead, she went to college and became a teacher in Buffalo, New York. 2 years later, her stepmother died. So she moved to Boston to manage her father's estate. Kate was miserable, hosting parties and dressing prim and proper. Finally, her father agreed to send her to medical school. After Kate graduated from college, she moved to Detroit and opened a medical clinic. That's where she met Bill Newcomb. Kate and Bill fell in love and got married. Sadly, the polluted air in Detroit was making Bill very sick. They moved back to Bill's childhood home in northern Wisconsin. Life was much harder in the North Woods. 18 miles from town, no electricity, no running water, and no furnace. Lots of wood chopping. But she and Bill were happy living in their cabin in the woods. When their first baby died because of another doctor's mistake, Kate turned her back on medicine. For the next 9 years, she didn't give it another thought. Kate and Bill had another baby. When Tommy was 3, he smushed his finger. Kate's expert bandage work impressed the doctor. That winter, Dr. Torpy needed to rely on Kate's medical skills. During a terrible storm, he called Kate and demanded she go save a woman who was dying of pneumonia. Kate saved her life and went to work. Dr. Kate was back. Nothing, not even sinking her canoe, stopped Dr. Kate when someone needed help. Dr. Kate saves thousands of lives every year. She became the community's health officer, helped clean up the water supply, got dairies to sanitize milk bottles, and set standards of vaccination in Wisconsin and nationwide. Still, there was more that she wanted to do for her town. The nearest hospital was over 2 hours away. Dr. Kate decided to build a hospital. After saving the life of a wealthy tourist, Dr. Kate was given $1,000 to get started. Construction began, then stopped, then started, and stopped again as money came and went. Building a hospital cost a lot of money, about 1 million pennies worth. Well, not exactly, but a group of students had the idea to fundraise for Dr. Kate by organizing a 1 million penny parade. Over 60,000 donations were made. Kate still needed more. So her friends surprised Kate by getting her on a TV show called This Is Your Life, broadcasting her cause nationwide. After that, money piled in. The post office needed reinforcements to carry it all in the mail. Pennies covered the entire gym floor, and the hospital was finished in 1954. At 71 years of age, Dr. Kate Pelham Newcomb passed away. Kate's determination to be a doctor had changed people's lives for the better. She delivered over 3,000 babies, built a hospital, saved thousands of lives, and inspired a generation with her kindness and devotion.